In case you haven't heard, America's medical industry is pretty effed, but it doesn't have to be. Welcome to Right to the Root. I'm your host, Stephanie Wright, and I've built my career on helping practices reach their full potential. Join us as we dig down to the root of the insurance industry's most complex problems and how we might be able to turn it all around. Today, we're here with Dr. Paul Henny. This was supposed to be just a conversation for us to meet one another, but it turned into a full-blown conversation in a few episodes. So he talks about a lot of the sneaky tactics that insurance companies have, and you just have to listen to believe it.
The computer shouldn't be dictating your care, nor should somebody that's never even met you before. They don't know what your mouth looks like. And I want everybody to know that. I want doctors to learn that. I want the patients to get just as upset about how it's not your doctor with their yacht or their Corvette. They all kind of feel and know it's a bit of the insurance industry, but it just really came to light with United Healthcare. And I think that this is the time that people's ears are really, really open now.
You know, there's been animosity towards Delta Dental and all insurance companies since their inception, really. Mm-hmm. You probably know the history of Delta Dental. I assume that it was started by dentists.
Yep.
And so, it was started as a nonprofit to be run by dentists for dentists. And in the beginning, it kind of sort of worked, but over time, it's become exploited like every other big insurance company. And the top level executives aren't necessarily dentists anymore, and they're making multi-million-dollar salaries and living in very nice, spacious mansions, and the companies have big real estate holdings, and they on paper they're nonprofit, but functionally they're very much like a for-profit company. And I was at a place where I shared similar anger and frustration with. Delta tends to be the primary agitator because it's usually the biggest percentage of a practice, because that's usually what the local school system or the hospital system or the local government in some way, they usually are aligned with Delta. So that usually is happening more frequently. So that tends to rise the anger up more.
Yeah, it exasperates it.
And so for several years, I did all of that until I just made the decision, and it was a good one, to start practicing without taking assignment at all, period. And which is not an easy decision, and it's not an easy transition, and it's not for everybody. And I never advise anyone to just do that without a lot of thinking and planning about that. For a number of years, I ran a consultancy myself, and which included business advisors as well as marketing experts, and me as a go inside the practice consultant and see what they're doing and how they're doing it and how well they're doing it and whether or not they're even ready for that kind of decision. But the most freeing way to practice is to completely separate yourself from that. That's the only way you really can have the kinds of conversations with patients that tend to move them towards better decision making. So any insurance company, including Delta Dental, because of the way it's designed, because it's driven off of codes, because it's driven off procedures, because it's driven off of them having to give you consent to do anything, tends to make the whole system reductionistic. So everybody's thinking about the thing, the tooth, the cost. And instead of thinking about their mouth and their body in a more holistic way, and it's sort of like taking a car that hasn't been repaired for 20 years into the shop, and all the mechanic does is look at one part that's broken or worn out and replace it. And there is no conversation about what's going to happen next. And that may be, 20 miles later.
Yeah.
But so the system itself is dysfunctional. It creates dysfunctional relationships. It creates codependency relationships. As a result of that, it causes a lot of confusion and misinformation, and therefore distrust, and then anger, then this and that. And for me, it got to the point where there were kind of two tipping point events for me. One was I had a patient, and I think she was a nurse, so she had Delta, and she owed me something like $65 and change or something, and she refused to pay it. It's the copay, because she felt like that I shouldn't be paid any more than Delta was, had decided to compensate me. So, there was a time when I hired people to do collections for me, and there were times when I paid my staff to call people up and remind them and send them letters and blah, blah, blah. Of course, she would never responded to any of that until one day she came in with a box full of pennies for $65 and whatever amount of change it was. And she dropped it on the front desk, slammed it on the front desk, really, and said, "There's your damn money. I'm transferring to another practice." And so I said, "Oh, okay. I'm kind of glad about that." I didn't say that, I'm saying that in my mind. I wasn't there. I was in the back.
Sure.
But I was happy that happened. But it was that in combination of fighting with people over $5 and $12 remaining and all this sort of thing. There was another case, Delta dental patient, where she came in and she needed 2 crowns adjacent to an edentulous space. One tooth was missing. And I, trying to think comprehensively, I'm thinking, a 3-unit bridge would be appropriate here. And this was really before implants were super common. And so we decided to do the 3-unit bridge there, assuming that without pre-authorization, assuming that Delta Dental would pay for that. Delta Dental came around and only paid for the 2 abutments, but not the ponic.
The whole purpose of the bridge.
Yeah. And it wasn't that she was missing teeth on the contralateral side and, the way they arrive at all these decisions, because a partial denture would be more appropriate or anything like that. That wasn't the case in this scenario. So I said, well, that came back. They refused to pay for the ponic. And I said, well, fine, you can just, you can make payments on it if that's something that you can't afford to do. And she said, no, absolutely not. I'm not paying for the ponic. And at that point, I'd just been, pushed to the edge far enough that I just said, fine. And I cut the ponic out. And I said, there you go.
I love you so much.
And then I said, and it was probably within a week or two of that time that I said to my team, I'm done with insurance. That's it. That's the last straw. I am not going to allow this process to push me towards making bad clinical decisions or to get into situations where people are angry at me for trying to do the right thing. Yeah. So it took a while for me to kind of understand it on both the intellectual and emotional levels, but that's what happened to me. And magically, and of course, my practice changed dramatically after that, but I was prepared to do that. I was highly trained at that point at Pankey Institute in Dawson and other places, and I was doing more and more comprehensive dentistry, and I was ready essentially to move away from being a insurance-centered family practitioner. So I just said, that's it. I'm either going to quit practicing or I'm dropping insurance. And that was my mindset. And I'm going to suck it up and suffer through whatever it takes for me to make this transition out. And it actually ended up being a lot smoother than I expected it to be. And it turned out to be much more profitable. I do a lot more dentistry per hour with a lot less stress and a lot fewer people now.
Mental health.
So, I enjoy dentistry. I still am, I'm still practicing at 40 years of practice. I have no, I have no physical impairments because I haven't been killing my body forever. And I enjoy it, and I teach and do all kinds of other things. But the only thing that allowed that to happen really was 25 years ago. I made that one decision based on all those things that happened to me. It was a do or die moment. And I was just over it. I said, I'm not going to do this for a living anymore with people behaving like this. I'm trying to do my best and giving my heart for them, but their reaction is anger, frustration, blaming, you name it. And I said, I'll find something else to do with my life other than this. So, that was a decision there. And I know there are people out there that somehow figure out how to tango with the devil. And I'm not one of them. I don't have the temperament for it. And so, the answer for me was just to say no more. But again, and in my consulting work over a number of years with people, I've helped them do that cautiously, which requires a lot of planning and preparation. So that's my short little story on my relationship with dentistry. We don't do any pre-authorizations anymore. Zero. Good. So, and most of the procedures I do are so much more expensive than dental insurance coverage. It's irrelevant to a large degree. So what is more relevant, much more relevant, is my ability and my team's ability to connect with patients and help them see where they are, how things are trending, and help them make good decisions towards their long-term health. And as a consequence of that, they tend to choose comprehensive care. That might not mean doing it all in one setting, but there's a plan, a strategy that's executed over time that they participated in designing, and they're all behind. And when you get to that level with people, relationship-wise, and they're collaborating with you instead of kind of almost an opponent on the playing field, the money thing goes away. It's just like, when you set your mind on buying a certain car, you're more focused on the features and how it looks and how you're going to feel driving down the road and what it's going to look like in your driveway than you are about the sticker price. You'll figure that part out if you really want the thing. And we do that all the time, whether it's at the grocery store or whether it's anywhere else in our life. That's the way we buy things. But dental insurance screws all that up. It gets in the middle of every purchasing decision like no other financial transaction in our life. They've become hypnotized by it because that's the way the medical side works. They're used to not paying anything, and then 3 or 4 months later, then they find out how much they owe, to the point where if they simply pay you a time of service, exactly like you do when you go to the grocery store and you buy milk, they don't say, well, I'll send you a bill in 3 months after we figure out the profit margin and how much you owe us. So simply asking people to say, when we do something, that's when you pay for it. If it's a long procedure, then we'll break that up and you can, parse that out however you want to do that. In their mind, and this has a lot to do with letters that Delta Dental sends and other insurance companies send, it's called paying up front. Now, how is paying at time of service paying up front? It is not paying up front.
No.
And so there's you've got to break the entire, the entire lexicon of insurance is intentionally confusing.
Absolutely.
It's disruptive. It's gaslighting. It's undermining, intentionally designed to undermine the trust in the relationship so that they can stay control of it. their goal is to pay as little as possible,
Mhm.
as slowly as possible. And if you, the dentist, suffer, well, that's just life. And unfortunately, Delta Dental didn't start out that way. It started out as a collaboration, supposedly, but very soon thereafter, and we're talking about the late 60s and early 70s, they wouldn't pay for preventive services. They wouldn't pay for, things that help people not have problems. And that's when the fights began, really, was that everything was focused on a sickness-centered medical model. And that, to a large degree, has never changed. So it's reductionistic, it's sickness-centered, it drives people towards making bad decisions at the wrong times. And when it gets the majority control of a practice, it creates a very unhappy place for most people that work in it.
Yeah.
Now, some people are much better at adapting to that than I am. Some people don't know any better, that actually they could live a different life than that.
Yeah.
Because everybody else around them is doing that too, and that's normal to them.
Keeping up with the Joneses.
But it's highly dysfunctional on a health level, on an emotional level, psychological level. It's highly, highly dysfunctional. And it's because this third party is meddling in the middle of every relationship, throwing in their 2 cents when, like you said, they don't know anything about the person. They've never examined the patient. They don't understand the complexity of touching this one tooth that could destabilize their whole a highly adapted dysfunctional system.
Mm-hmm.
And so they don't compensate you for evaluating the complexity of the situation. They don't compensate you for making good clinical choices. They don't compensate you for making appropriate materials that are going to last. They don't compensate you for spending enough time with the person so they can make better decisions. None of that's on the table. So where does it all go? Just go. The only way that dentists can survive in that environment is to scale it up, delegate it out, scale it up, delegate it out, and then hire more and more people to chase insurance codes, and more people in the back room to fight with the insurance company. And then they go home and scream and yell at their husband and kick the dog or whatever because they hate it too. And so, it just comes down to what kind of life do you want to have. And dentistry, you do, it's possible to practice medicine outside of that dysfunction.
Absolutely.
A few people do it. And it's possible to do that in dentistry too, but you've got to understand the game and how to get there.
I agree. I'm really delighted here in West Michigan to start seeing some health organizations. For instance, one of the second largest private healthcare, Trinity Health around here, they removed network participation with Aetna and maybe Cigna, which is huge, a hospital organization. And I was just right there for it. And, this is at the same time I see this letter on their desk. As I was going in for an iron infusion, that my insurance company denied the one that my doctor wanted me to have and had me literally risk my life with a different iron infusion and say, let's gamble. Because if this one goes good, we're going to save thousands of dollars. And sure enough, I was that one small percent that reacted negatively, as they were doing the little test amount of the iron. They have to do a test amount because it's that bad. And I'm reading that letter and I'm like, good for this hospital organization to snap back. And here in Michigan, we have Spectrum Health that's turned into Corewell Health now, and Corewell Health owns Priority Health, which is the insurance company that all of their doctors have. That's all over what the availability is here, and how that aspect is not collusion. I have no understanding. How is it that Ticketmaster can have lawsuits on them for monopolies, but not Delta Dental?
I think we're going to see, there's been continued what I would call verticalization in the healthcare marketplace, meaning I think Aetna owns CVS, if I remember correctly. That was a consolidation that happened, I don't know, 5 years ago, something like that. So, in my mind, I see Delta Dental owning dental offices. I mean, as soon as the legal structures are broken down, then there will be Delta Dental offices.
If you think
And
about it. Yeah. Aspen's right up there. We had
Right.
some friends that had said, oh no, I go to Delta Dental for my dentist. And I was like, no, you don't. I'm like, yes, I do. And when they told me where it was at, I was like, that's Aspen Dental. And they're like, everything in there is Delta all over the walls. I would have thought that I went, like, that's what my dental office was in. I was like, of course. Big corporations lining each other's corporations, just kind of sweetening that deal so the partnership works well in the end.
Yeah, and unfortunately, they've got their tentacles inside the dental schools and everything now too. So all the all the young dental students are so immersed in thinking and being brainwashed and thinking that Delta Dental is a beneficial partnership.
Yeah.
That's going to look out for their interests. That's not the case. That's not the case. Delta Dental, and everybody, it's the United States. It's a capitalistic society. They have every right to have a business and run that business the way they want. The problem is the deception.
Yeah, that's a huge thing.
The problem is their attempts to undercut, quite intentionally, relationships that dentists have with their patients, so that, it's just a form of manipulation to try to get the patient to do what they want them to do, not because it's in their best health interest, because they're not in a position to know.
Yeah, they don't.
But because it benefits them financially. And then they
sending letters for them to go to a PPO dentist.
They hide behind their nonprofit status and say, well, no, we don't have a profit motive. And that's just not true, So I don't see it ever improving. I think it's going to get worse. Like I said, I think the next phase is more vertical integration. And managing Delta Dental and all other forms of insurance out of your practice really is the only way to practice what I would call true patient-centered care.
I agree.
So that's the good news and the bad news. The good news is you can do it if you know what you're doing and you're willing to make the sacrifices necessary to get there. The bad news is it's hard. It takes time. When you separate your practice from dental insurance, in my opinion, you're making the decision for the very first time to function fully in the free marketplace. That means you will stand or fall based on how well you deliver on the promise. And what is that promise?
Yeah.
So it's no different than the finest restaurant you have in town. They're only around because every time their patrons go in there, they get as much or more than what they expect.
Yeah.
And most dental practices are not run like that. They're run the other way. Everything is structured based on compensation first. Yes. And then, if it was a restaurant, it's more equivalent to, a McDonald's restaurant.
Absolutely.
Because they start with cost and then they build expectations around that. You don't go to McDonald's with the expectation of having a great hamburger. You go to McDonald's because it's going to be fast. It's going to be efficient. It's going to be predictable. And,
with the long-term effects that they don't think about.
And over time, it's going to be smaller because inflation is going to force them to give you smaller sizes, and it'll be more expensive at the same time. It's smaller portion. So, and that's fine as long as people understand that's the game. The problem in dentistry is people don't understand the game because it's all full of fog that the insurance industry has created intentionally to keep everybody confused. So who are they going to believe? They're going to believe this big nonprofit corporation that's on TV every day.
Oh yeah, marketing and baseball games.
With smiling faces and holding hands with your kids, and who they're going to believe.
Dental Foundation,
this wonderful nonprofit company, or this dentist that I never really liked dentists to begin with. So who am I going to side with naturally? They know the game. These companies hire industrial psychologists. They have got the game on. They know what they're doing. And I say, more power to them. Go for it. It's not going to change. The only solution is for dentists to wise up and say no more, like I did.
Yeah.
No more. I am not going to live that way anymore. So
Yeah, it's absolutely true. Um, I don't know how many clients know that I've taken fee for service. But the amount of times that I walk into practices and, I do a very thorough assessment and data metrics going back years, because I want to make sure that we have this trend of loyalty from the patients, which tells me that, the patients trust their doctor. They're not like overdiagnosing, and we're not seeing on, the Google reviews where they, felt like they saw a snake oil salesman, and then visiting with the team and making sure the team believes in their doctor and believes in the care that's there at that practice as well. And then I look at the demographic to help gauge how steep is this hill that we're going to go ahead and go on.
Right.
We can do it. It just might be a steep one, because there are demographics, here, Wyoming, Michigan, blue collar GM area, right? That's a tough market. That is a market that is your true blue collar, middle income, everything. I have insurance that should pay for it, right? Like, it's generally an older demographic in that area as well too. And it is. I'm very selective of the clients, and I'm very real from the beginning, whether to say, I can get you here, but you're not close right now. There's a lot of work that we have to do.
Well, the truth of the matter is that most towns and cities are similar to that situation,
Yeah.
right? The place that I practice, Roanoke, is no different. The biggest employer is the school system and the hospital system. This is a typical deindustrialized economy. Used to steam locomotives up until the 1950s, and after that, it's been trying to figure out its purpose ever since. That's a common story throughout the Midwest and much, up on into the Northeast. That's the story. That's the story of America.
They have to have that trust and loyalty.
Some areas of America have, had new economies like, Silicon Valley and so forth, or a different economy like Greater Northern Virginia, Greater DC. But those places have their own issues as well. A house in Northern Virginia costs 3 to 4 times more than it does here. So everybody's making more money, but they are so in debt, they can't afford dentistry either. Yeah. So you just looking at the raw, median income and all of that can be deceptive. And it turns out that, these average, boring, middle-class people that aren't, driving around flashy cars, they arrive in your parking lot in a Ford F-150 or something, and they got work boots on or whatever it is. They got more cash in the bank, and they're more flexible about making decisions than a lot of these highly educated people with PhDs and master's degrees, and they got educational debt out the wazoo. Their mortgage payment is high. They like to go out to expensive restaurants and impress their friends. They got a BMW in the parking lot that they're barely making the payments on. And then they show up in your office, and it's like, I'm not doing anything other than that my insurance doesn't cover. So, I mean, it's the same game. It's called working with human beings.
That middle class is the ones that once you earn the trust.
It's the rare patient that comes into the office that absolutely has the bank to make the big decisions immediately. It's something that they need to plan for in a lot of cases. And that's fine. That's absolutely fine. That allows you the opportunity to develop a relationship with them and set goals and build trust. And before you do the bigger case with them, then all the trust bridges have been built, and it's easy. I mean, that's what I did yesterday. I had one patient. It's like a $30,000 case.
Mm-hmm.
But I started that case a year ago. We did Invisalign. We came to know each other, set everything up. And, it's basically going to be a full mouth rehabilitation. that she's decided to do over time as she was prepared to do that. And as we came to know each other, I mean, just consider this for a moment. What kind of trust level does it take for a person to sit their head back in your chair and let you cut down almost all of their teeth? How much trust does that take? Unless you're a friggin' idiot, it takes a lot of trust. A lot.
Absolutely. And that's what I look at loyalty wise.
Right.
How much does your patients trust you?
And if you're of the mindset, because you just returned from, how to increase your net income by $50,000 a month seminar last week at the Hilton Inn Suites around the corner with bad food and a buffet. If you think, that's just going to happen because you learn some clever little phrases that can manipulate people around, you're like, you don't get it.
Yeah.
You don't get it. But that's what everybody wants, is an easy answer, a quick answer, right? Well, I hate to say it, they don't exist. They don't exist.
No.
Now, when you get to be my age, it gets easier because I've been around a long time and I have a reputation, and people come to me for specific things because they know somebody that knows somebody that I helped a lot.
And you're going to do what's right.
Right. And that's called earning it, not buying it, not manipulating it, but earning it. And so you can't work that out in a weekend course at the Hilton Inn. I hate to say that.
You don't have to. I hate to say it. And I'm, when I work with my clients, there's no one size fits all. And one of the first times, it was probably 10 years ago, helping a doctor go fee for service. And, I knew a lot about it as well, too. And I've always been passionate about it. And the first time I knew that I can't judge the complete demographic just because they have a higher median household income or anything. And I had to put all of my focus on the trust and loyalty that the patients had in their dentist. And that's why I look back so many different years. Is I had a woman that came in and I was like, this is going to be a slam dunk. We're going on Monday, fee for service. She was just talking about how she just purchased a car that's got to stay down in Florida for her Florida home. She has a house in Alberta. This is going to be easy. And here I am with all this confidence at the checkout and having the conversation. She was like, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to find somewhere else. It's just not in the budget. And that's when I was just like, this isn't what it is. Those are the ones so the tough crowd in the blue collar is because you have to earn their trust. Doesn't matter anything else. That's the whole part about it. And it does take a lot, just like you said, to lay down and have somebody cut into your mouth. And that doesn't come just overnight. That doesn't come with the young grads that just came out and purchased another doctor's practice and they think that they're hot shot or anything. And they've got the flashiest equipment and everything. None of that stuff matters. It's that trust. And some of the most difficult clients I have are the ones with the highest median household income, because those people are not going there for that. They're going there for that flashiness, what they have or whatever it might be, but they will jump ship. They don't have any loyalty. They don't have a relationship, and I'm not saying every single one of the patients. That's the more difficult one, because if I have a well-established practice that I can go in and the doctor hasn't come back from a weekend course and just going about it and really just all about the new patients, but not worrying about the patients that he already has there and taking really great care of them. There's so much that they have to learn. There's so much relationship that they have to build. And I get clients that call me right away that say, I can't do that. I just purchased this practice. I can't do this. And I'm like, you got to call me back in 18 to 24 months. You don't have a senior dentist that's right there with you and helping and can be part of that. And even then, they're still probably going to blame you for this change because they know that you're the one that's coming in and stuff. You have to have this relationship and everything else will matter, because you could have 100 patients at the start when you're doing this, right? And we're just going easy numbers. Everybody has more than 100 patients. And you can lose 20 of them because the other 80% has complete confidence and loyalty, and you're fine. When you have a break-even point that I can, tell the doctors where they're at, that break-even point continues to move. If I see what's called a revolving door, that we have just as many new patients coming in, but our active recall patient count. I don't count one-offs on palliative care. Recall is where the relationship is. That's 80% of the care that's coming out of there. Those are people that are coming back every 6 months, every 3-4 months. They trust you. And if we don't have that, it's one of those conversations I tell them, this is a steep hill. We can get there if you're willing to put the skin in the game as well too, because it is hard work, and it's to sit back and you have to change that thought process that it's, again, all about the money. I tell the doctors all the time, you cannot look at your success because there's holes in your chair, or not holes in your chair, sorry, there's holes in your schedule and you don't have a patient in the chair. That's not gauging your success there. And that's really hard for especially a lot of younger dentists as well too. It's harder for doctors that've been around for a long time. When you have, especially here in Michigan, you have 60 to 70% of your insurance income that's coming from one source that has their name all over everywhere, that has manipulated the general public.
Yeah, and another piece of this conversation is that in spite of the fact that dentistry for a long time has tried to posture itself as being a preventative, health-oriented thing.
Yeah.
In reality, it's not, for reasons that we just discussed. It's an insurance-centered, transactional thing for the most part. And people aren't going to make bigger, more comprehensive decisions unless they learn a lot more about where they are and how they're trending and what that means to them over time. And to some people, it doesn't matter. It's not an issue to them. But to a lot of people, it does matter. To a lot of people, they don't want to end up like mom that's now in the nursing home and she can't eat half the things that they bring to the room because she doesn't have any teeth and the denture she has doesn't fit and she's miserable as hell every day. And they go to see her every week, and they can visualize themselves easily getting into that situation. So they've got a lot of motivation to avoid that and to work towards that not being their destiny as well. You can't scare people into those kinds of understandings and realizations. You have to take the time to let them see it and realize it and learn it at their own pace. Most people, by the time they are reaching, into their 40s and around 50, they've got system breakdown. They've got issues going on in their joints. They've got accelerated wear patterns, loss of vertical dimension, destruction of their anterior and posterior teeth because they're bruxing, whatever. Maybe they have apnea issues, all kinds of things, sometimes overlapping on each other and influencing each other. And that's a complex system with all kinds of different variables influencing it that they, generally speaking, come into the relationship knowing next to nothing about. And so us sitting a person down and, let's say you're really, really super special and you allow an hour and a half for your new patient exam process because you were just at a course last weekend at the Hilton and that's what they told you should do. So that's what you're doing now. And now you take an hour and a half to tell them everything that's wrong with their mouth. And they look at you and they go, daggone, nobody ever told me that. How much is that going to cost? And you tell them whatever it is, big number. And then what's the next question? How much is my insurance going to cover? So this is not a conversation about health. This is a conversation about money. You have inadvertently set up the start of your relationship to be centered around money.
Yeah.
And that's the way dentists are trained. That's the way we were taught in dental school. Why? Because most patients are coming there and they're paying very little for their service. They're trading it for their time. Mm-hmm. And so we got no real economy, real life economy, marketplace experience in dental school. And then we come out and we're thrown into these dysfunctional practice situations that are driven by insurance codes and daily production goals and, whatever. And it's just complete bedlam to the point where, just get on, some of the most popular dental Facebook groups, and you'll see very quickly the misery so many dentists are in today. Usually, usually the ones that are in their first 5 or so years of practice.
Yeah.
And it's because they're just thrown into the deep end, and they're not prepared clinically. They're not prepared emotionally. They're not prepared financially. They're not prepared psychologically. And they're hanging around a bunch of other people that aren't either. So they're like giving each other bad advice.
Gosh.
So it's, and then they get on the, then they get on the internet, and then they
see it all over there.
Each other more bad advice faster. So it's, it's amazing we've survived this long, actually. So
yeah,
that's the situation.
Very true. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Henny. I'm really excited to be able to connect with you again. And this was just a really great conversation.